Okay, there we go. The recording button's on. So I've got your consent to record.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and I'm going to be calling you Jewel, and I'm so glad that I was able to get a hold of you because it is really hard to track down some of our older original members of the 12-step group. So I was, and then if I do, to get them to be recorded is a whole other story. So thank you very much for doing this interview. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, because, you're like, one of the things that just blew me away when I, first met you and talked to you was that you were like the first generation of the members that I'd seen that I had never met that had come straight through the process itself that didn't know me, didn't know me from Adam, but the process worked, and that just, oh my God, it was so heartwarming because of what we had to go through in the early days, which I am trying to get, written down in our history book that I'm working on about what entailed in all that, bringing that to you. But what I wanted to, hear from you is what it was like, from your perspective as someone that, didn't even know me. I mean, you were in Phoenix when you came into recovery, right?
I was, and it's so emotional now for me to talk about it because it was, I just came from speaking up at the Skid Row, nickel meeting out there, and it just, I didn't have to go that far down because of this program. I wasn't one of those that was standing at the street corner, but I knew there was like something very, very wrong, and that's where I could end up.
Well, what was that like for you? I mean, tell me what your life was like and how you came into the program. We were Prostitutes Anonymous then, obviously. But, I mean, tell me all about that whole thing that led you into the program.
Yeah, well, I'd grown up, in a ghetto area in South Phoenix, and there was always that thinking of, like the dependency on men to take care of us. There was no domestic violence shelters back then, so my mom was very dependent on my father for our well-being, and he would go and spend the money, and there was always this kind of mentality of you need to, do whatever it is that's necessary to take care of yourself, and that it was going to be a struggle. And I grew up with domestic violence. My father was drinking, and then there was sexual abuse, which I think was like the, happens to a lot of our members. I mean, it's just a continual.
Was it a family member? How old were you?
I was probably maybe 5, and it was like 2 different family members, my mother's siblings, at various times in that age group that I was in. And so I just thought, like, I just remember, like, being, groomed to behave in a sexual manner.
Well, you also bring up because your mother couldn't get away, then the kids were victimized also.
Yes, so there was always that that there was going to be, I can, because I was so young when I got into prostitution, I compare it to just like Stockholm syndrome or that whole concept of, sex trafficking victims who are kind of like brainwashed, and they don't leave after a while. They don't leave even when they can leave, and
right.
they get like attached to their victimizer. Like
right. And see, I like to address that because one of the things that I found important in the beginning was, we didn't have the term trafficking victim, but I knew the difference. But I also knew that the victims were in so much denial about it that, if you came at them that way, they would say, that's not me. Initially, in the very beginning, it takes time to accept what you are. So I found that when I stuck to just, do you want to get out in the beginning, just do you want to get out, then I would get a universal yes, of course. Everybody would say yes. So I'd get that point of contact by just focusing on, do you want to get out? But I mean, when you say you were young, how young were you when you started, and how did you start in the business?
I think I was close to maybe like 16 or 17. And I started I just called up someplace in a phone book, and I don't even know how I knew that to do that. It was kind of like I was just in survival mode. I had just had a baby when I was 15, 16 years old and needed money, and I was trying to go to school and pay the bills and support myself with this baby, and my mom was, making it very difficult for me to get any help from the family.
Didn't your mother put you in a position where almost it was like you were saving the family by doing what you did, right?
Yeah, when she found out what was going on, she started to charge me for things like, oh, I'm going to babysit your kid, so you need to pay me this much money. And it would be an extort and like just, an unreasonable amount of money because she knew I was making money. So she exploited it. And then made it very difficult for me to get out once I did start because she would charge me for things.
Basically, she was pimping you then, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think that she did that in various ways from the time I was very young. And I think that being that I'm of Latin American descent, that it's a historical pattern in my culture to pimp out young girls and exploit for profit.
Yeah, because I also remember you said that you were seeing a lot of this growing up. It was just normal to you.
Yeah, like I just thought that was the way you just, I was kind of trained, like you don't have to do anything. You just have to look pretty. And I remember I've seen a picture of myself when I was only like 5 or 6, and I was definitely like in this pose like a model, and I'm just a little girl. And I'm posing for the camera in such a way that it was seductive. And so that's what I learned from being in that kind of growing up with sex addiction. Also, my father was always had another family, and my mom was always spending most of her time chasing him, trying to make him come home. And so it was just very dysfunctional, and I learned a lot of the coping skills. Those are the coping skills that I learned to survive. And I just thought that's what it was going to be like. That's all I was a pretty face, and that's how I was going to have to get by in life.
Well, so you're also bringing up another point. It's not like your mother went out and, sold you. It wasn't like she started you selling you, pimping you. But she was, however, still pimping you, which made it difficult for you to leave, which is why, also one of the things is it can be a very gray area as to how the person gets in, how they get out. I mean, we go through these cycles where that line between where we're being exploited versus not exploited is so gray,
Yeah, I think I was being exploited at home first because she would leave us with the family members and I have a feeling that she knew that we were being sexually abused, but she would leave us with them, knowing full well that these family members have abused other children, and we were going to be unsafe. Yeah, but she'd leave us with them, and so I think it started from a very young age. Just at that level where she would just abandon us to be perpetrated.
Wow. So what on earth then brought you into recovery? I mean, it sounds like it was normal, but I mean, so what was the point for you?
I think for me was I had met somebody, and I didn't want to lose him. I was very codependent, just very much in love, and I wanted to get out. And I had prayed. I just remember, there was a few things that my mother did do well for us growing up that she did, give me, was she sent us to private Catholic school, and she didn't let us cook. I didn't even know how to cook. She made us read books, and she tried to give us a foundation of an education. And she worked, extra hours when we were young to pay for that Catholic education, that private school, even though we grew up in the ghetto. And so I remember going to church, which was always kind of like my safe space, and praying for a miracle. Like, I need a miracle, and so my miracle was this guy that I had met, and he was a police officer. And I just decided, well, that's my miracle, and he was in love with me, and it was like, love at first sight, and so, he had thought that somebody else was going to, ask me to marry him before him, because, my phone kept ringing, and it was actually the agency that I was working for, the escort service, was looking for me to go out on a call on a Saturday night, but I had ditched the escort service to go out on a date with a boyfriend. And so they're calling me, hey, you're supposed to be on call. Why aren't you answering the phone? So they'd be calling over and over and over. And I had regulars looking for me through the escort service. And they were very protective of me because I was so young that my escort service was very, they were a good, fit for me because I was so young, and they did try their best to protect me by keeping me with just regulars that were like in exclusive hotels because I was so young, like they wanted to make sure I was safe.
You were like, 17 now, right?
Yeah. What's
the legal age in Arizona? Were you of legal age?
No. I was not even, yeah.
So they were not only protecting you, they were protecting themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you got popped, they'd be in a lot of trouble. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just, my phone was ringing off the hook from my regulars from the escort service, and they're trying to reach me, and I had, ditched them to go on a date with the boyfriend or the fiance, and he thought, well, he wasn't my fiance yet. He thought that somebody else was pursuing me and that he better marry me before somebody else, married me.
Oh, okay.
And so he asked me to marry him because he thought all these other guys were after me, we're going to beat him to the punch, And I said, sure. And he's like, well, let's go to Vegas so we don't have to have a big wedding. And I'm like, sure. And I went to the escort service and said, I'm retiring. Here's your, service fees for the last few, calls I made. And they're like, what's going on? I go, I'm leaving. I'm getting married. I'm marrying a cop. And that's nothing short of a miracle. How do you go from, being a prostitute to marrying a cop, to being the wife of a cop? That's like a miracle right there.
Right. And I know where we're going with this is, my perspective is I saw this problem before. The reason why I even started the 12-step group was when I was running the service. I would see that the women would come up to me and say that. They'd say, I'm getting married. Or they would say, I got my degree. And they'd say, I'm quitting the business, and they make a big exit speech, and we'd have a going-away party. And I'd just smile, and I would just say, please prove me wrong. Please don't be back in 6 months, because that's what I kept seeing was this revolving door, that it just, whatever it was, the degree, the marriage. One woman would open a business. Another woman she opened up a whole big cleaning business she was making. Another woman became an attorney. I saw these women, making the change and saying, oh, I'm quitting, I'm gone forever, and then boom, 6 months later or less, they're back. So you got married to this cop, and you should have lived happily ever after, and what happened?
And I couldn't leave the business. I couldn't, I was also drinking. I couldn't stop drinking. I didn't know I had a problem, but I didn't feel good enough to be a cop's wife. We would go to dinners, and even though I looked like all the other cops' wives, if not even prettier, because he was 10 years, he was about 8 years older than me. So the wives were a little bit older than me. So, I didn't look any different from them. They were all stay-at-home moms also. And, but I didn't feel that I always felt like I was playing house or something, it wasn't real. I didn't feel worthy and I wanted to go back and see my I wanted to go back and see my regulars. And I had, like when I told them goodbye, I had their phone numbers, and I wanted to call them really bad and go back to that life that I felt comfortable with. Because I felt so uncomfortable being in this new role, being a wife and a mother and staying at home. Like, I think I need program just as much to accept the good things that come into my life.
Yeah. No, that's statistically true. More of us relapse when it's good than when it's bad.
Yeah, and I couldn't accept the good stuff. Like, I just couldn't accept that new life for me. I couldn't do it. I was just too addicted to, like, the drama, he was old school, kind of guy where he believed, that he should take care of all the finances, and I was so used to controlling everything, my own finances, my own, and I didn't feel comfortable, like that he had the checking account, and I was like, well, and yeah, I had access to it. I could go and spend money if I wanted to, but I felt like, no, I need to have control of, I need to have this, immediate cash flow like I used to have, that whole, you go out, you make $500 and, or $1,000 in a night or whatever, and I didn't have that. We had a cop salary.
Oh, the living on the budget is a bitch. Yeah, that's tough.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest things I think we cope with in our program.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to do that. I was used to that quick, fast money. I didn't know how to budget. I didn't know how to spend. I didn't know how to share money. Like, we had to share one income. And I wasn't used to any of that. I just wanted to have my own money separate from him that he didn't know about. Like, I wanted to just have a stash that of it, so I could spend and not have to be accountable. I never wanted to really be accountable for anything, be responsible.
Yeah, and see,
be a grown-up.
Everything you hit on, I went through the same thing, and that was the biggest question is, well, how do you change? And see, for me, I kept asking people, like, well, how do I do this? How do I learn? And, I was fortunate. I was very fortunate that, I had people that were there to give me the answer. I lucked into, before this started, I lucked into some ex-drug dealers big-time drug dealers. We're talking the 80s, right? And these are people that brought in planes and boats to the shed, and they were able to show me how. And part of that was the sponsorship relationship. Is everything that you're describing I had to go through as my sponsor. I had to account for every penny. I had to get approval on spending things. We had to plan. We had to budget. All of that stuff I was able to work through with a sponsor. And once I saw, the change, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, well, this is how we can take this dynamic. Because you're right. You're sitting there going, I don't know how to do this. And I'm sure it was causing strain on your marriage.
It was. I just didn't know how to live like a normal person. I knew how to live like a person that goes and, makes a bunch of money, spends it, and then when I need more money, go and, spend it, go and, make some more in one night, quick cash, fast, easy, and then spend it, like it was just going out of style, just not being responsible, responsible with the money. And then, it did cause conflict. So I was like, no, I need an allowance, or and I never could stay within my budget. And it would be stupid stuff that I didn't need. And he was also buying stuff, and then we were, just not responsible with the finances, and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to live that way. I didn't want to live like normal people.
So how did you hear about Prostitutes Anonymous? What year was it you heard about us?
It was in around 1990, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 90. Maybe 89, around there. And it was like about a year before I went into AA and got sober. It was like around 89, 90. And I heard about, I went to some 12-step meetings because a counselor said, you need to go to 12 steps. Because I was telling her I'm feeling crazy in this new life. I just feel crazy. And she said, go to some 12-step meetings. And I did. And I ran into somebody that I knew from working out there that worked for my escort service, another woman. And she was getting sober in Narcotics Anonymous. And she said, come to this WARN. It was Women at Risk Network. And then she sent me to Dignity as well, which was being run by Kathleen Mitchell, which was the Prostitutes Anonymous program, brand new here in Arizona. And Kathleen Mitchell wanted me to, she had just gotten, she had some legal issues, so she couldn't take meetings into the jails, and so she chose me. She's like, well, you're, you have a good backup here. You're married, you have time, you have, some resources, and you've never been arrested, so you can take meetings into Durango jail. And I started immediately once I came into Prostitutes Anonymous.
Yeah, Phoenix was an amazing story because I remember Kathleen wrote about 1988. She wrote me from the jail. She said, I've been arrested like 50 times. I don't know if that was the exact number, but she said, I've been arrested like 50 times. I'm done. And she wrote into LA, and I said, well, we've got this jail step study program, and we work through the step process in jail. And then she was just so excited. She says, I've got to go out and carry the message, because I explained it to her. I said, the only way you're going to keep what you have is by giving it away. So, yeah, she did start bringing the meeting into the jail, which then, some people came to her from what I understand and started Dignities. And you're coming in 89. I mean, yeah, you were coming in right as she had started these jail meetings. But I know that they have these requirements, and see, I wondered about that, too, how she did that, because they have these requirements where you can't be in jail within the last 5 years. So it sounds like you were that bridge to get into the jail even though she had just left it.
Yeah, that's why she couldn't take them in, because she had just gotten out, and then I had never gotten in any trouble, and so, and then being that I was also, a cop's wife, so that helped her too. Yeah.
Oh, that's like, cool.
She's kind of like, well, look, we have members that are, like, responsible, that are, like, members of society now. Like, even though I didn't feel like a responsible person, I just, it was all like an inside job that I wasn't doing. Everything on the outside looked good, like I was married, we were going to have a baby, and we were trying to get pregnant, and I couldn't get pregnant, so I did service work, and all
of that. That was your message. I mean, here you are looking perfect on the outside, and you're still having problems. I mean, that's an important message. People understand if you're on a street corner with a pimp and a drug addict, they understand. What they don't understand is why would you need a program, when you look all fine on the outside. And, of course, what I said about Kathleen, she said in other interviews, so I'm not saying anything that hasn't been printed about the history of that. But, yeah, I did wonder how she got in the jail when she just got released. And it sounds like you were that bridge. So, I mean, but that again just shows that your coming in was just such perfect timing for everyone, even,
Yeah,
even you being a cop wife, I'm sure helped get you in that jail,
Oh, yeah, it did. And I was, because Arizona is very conservative. They're very, it's hard to go into the jails here. They don't just let, they have like strict, we have like the most notorious sheriff in all of the nation.
Oh, yes.
He's well known. And so it's like very, kind of like cowboys and Indians over here still.
Well, did you ever worry about that? I mean, because he is a notoriously badass sheriff. Did you ever worry that you were going to get arrested?
I didn't, because they were so careful with me, and they only sent me to people who they already knew, who had already seen other people, and I never really saw, strangers that the escort service did not know about, that they didn't know.
So these things about coming down harder on arrests, in your mind, you're thinking, well, this doesn't affect me at the time, right? It didn't scare you, in other words.
No, and then, I was a teenager, so I had that whole, nothing bad's gonna happen to me, I'm fine.
I know.
You have that teenage mentality that, like, oh, this is fancy, like I just kind of lived in my own little world, like that. I thought I was like the happy hooker or something.
Oh, me too. I thought I was Xavier Hollander back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, and I was young, so, I just thought, I can get away with anything, and I did for a long time. I did, yeah. But it catches up with me, it just caught up with me on an emotional level and the heart. It caught up with me in where I felt so spiritually, emotionally bankrupt. And like I was just like an empty shell of a being trying to be this grown-up wife, and there was nothing, there was nothing there. And I was also
did it even help you? I mean, what were you getting out of it in those days with the 89? I mean, what was the meetings like then? What were you getting out of it?
Oh my God, they were so amazing because I got to hear other women that were just like me that had left maybe porn or some of them didn't even, were just doing like what I was doing, just seeing regulars or, because I didn't work all the time. Like, I would take I was more like a part-time hooker. I would only, because, I was raised very, very conservative in a Catholic family, and I knew it was like a sin, and I felt really guilty about what I was doing, but I couldn't stop because I was so addicted to the fast money, the drama, the intensity, the lifestyle. And so, and also like that I didn't have to account to anybody about my money or be dependent on anybody. It was very freeing too. In the very beginning, it was very liberal because I'd always seen my mother be so dependent on my father. And I remember watching that and going, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be, needing somebody like that. So
that's a lot of what it was for me in the beginning too, because I just saw the same thing. My mother was dependent on my father, and I did not want to depend on a man. I wanted to, but I didn't know how to make that kind of money in any other way, not in any other way.
Yeah. So it was also very liberating at the same time that it was killing me. That it eventually was killing me spiritually. But in the beginning, it was very liberating. It was like, I have this fast cash, and I don't have to account to any man about it.
Well, that's what we talk about in our recovery guide, that our solution has now become the problem,
Yeah.
And it's so deceptive because, in the beginning we look at it as a solution, but then it becomes the problem. And that's when things twist for us, But then, again, how do you stop? So, I mean, was there the meeting in the jail and then the meeting outside the jail? I mean, what was it like back then?
Yeah, we had a meeting. There was another NA member, Nora, I can't remember her last name, but she started a program called Women's Street Support Center where we would go out and do outreach to women, like go in a little van and pick up the women and bring them into this women's home. It was just a daytime place so they could take a shower and get clean clothes and eat and get clean needles most of all. Then they could get, contraception, whatever it was they needed, shampoo, anything. And also we also had a meeting there for them in case management. We had a Prostitutes Anonymous meeting there that I also ran during the week as well, for that program. And so it was just like so dynamic back then because we had, Dignity was growing, and Kathleen Mitchell was like doing all this, really just growing the program, and it became like this huge, Catholic Charities took it over, and they were just so support. It was just there was like a lot of support. There are women that say that I've heard now speak that went to that Dignity program. When they had the Prostitutes Anonymous there, and they said that they had vans that would come out and pick them up at their house. And they didn't know how else they were going to get to, to the help and to the meetings or anything. Like, they couldn't even leave their house, and it was just so hard. And they needed that van to go and pick them up and take them into the program.
Oh, absolutely. Out here in L.A., I had a meeting in the Valley, I had a meeting in Hollywood, a meeting in Beverly Hills, one in Long Beach, and one in West Hollywood. And I always had to, I would go do my round around the city, and I would take everybody to, nobody had a car, so I had to pick everybody, up. And I remember that when Mayor Bradley then came to me and was talking about, okay, design me a program, I said, well, the first thing is you need a van driver, because I don't know what it is, but some of it, it's all different, too. Some women just don't have a car. Some don't have a license. Some have health problems. They can't. It seems to be like something,
Yeah, and that's also a job skill, because I was able to transfer that skill into my job now. I'm an adjunct faculty. I'm a professor now. I have, a couple of college degrees, so I teach classes in a college, and I have students that come from all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds. I teach sociology, women's studies, ethnic studies, and I have kids that are like really struggling, young people, and I always remember that sometimes you have to just spoon feed the recovery, the education, whatever it is, and that's what it's like. It was like we need to hold people's hand. We can't just call them up and say, hey, this is the address, see you in an hour. They're not going to make it.
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is one thing. I remember the difference between then and now, which is one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, is, there were plenty of resources that were available back then. The biggest problem, of course, was one, transportation, and then two is the members just for some reason could not go alone. Now, when I would pick them up and go with them, we got everything done, whether it was getting their driver's license or their Social Security card or so they could work, or whether it was to go to school, or whether it was to go on a job interview, or the HIV test is another one, that as long as we had someone that would go with them, I would pair up our early members, with each other, so that they would have people, because there was just no way I could, humanly do it all alone. But I found that as long as somebody went with them to court even, they kept missing court dates, but as long as we had someone that would go with them, they'd go. So it wasn't a matter of needing more programs or more services. It's just a matter of what we needed was somebody to pick them up and go with them and hold their hand,
Yeah, and I do that today in my work, even with my 12-step work, whether I'm at my actual paid employment or whether I'm doing my 12-step work, I always remember that, sometimes you have to go to the person's house, knock on their door, go inside, make them a cup of tea, hold their hand, walk with them. I had somebody the other day, he was, I have some health issues now, so I was going up to the podium to get my medallion, my 24-year medallion in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh, awesome.
And I didn't feel well. I was having, some pain. And one of the old timers, this 81-year-old elder, she's Native American from Alaska. She comes over. She knows I don't feel well. She takes my hand and she walks me up to the podium to collect my 24-year medallion.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're here for each other. Because another thing I would hear that would infuriate me in the early days is I would ask, the police and the sheriff and everybody, why are you so hostile about us? Especially the probation department. I would say, why are you so hostile about prostitutes? And they'd say, because we can give them everything they need and they don't take it, or they leave, or whatever. And that would be the one thing I would ask them. I'm like, do you have someone there holding their hand? Do you have someone there with them, giving them support, and, taking them? Or do you just flip them a number and say, here, show up? It's like they flip a number and say, here, show up. Well, it's not going to work with us. And a lot of it, I think, as you know, a lot of it is that anxiety hits and you just can't move.
Yeah, because it's like we have Stockholm Syndrome. We're just kind of
oh my God, it's too overwhelming. The disease is so overwhelming, and it's
Yes.
like, I think of, victims of sexual abuse, whether, sometimes they don't tell. I've worked on the crisis mobile team where we went out and responded to, girls that had just been raped, and they don't, like, the police asked them, why didn't you tell us when it happened? And she's like, I don't know. Well, it's because that's how the brain survives. That's how we survive, is that we just freeze.
Yeah.
It's literally like, it's a brain mechanism that protects us from the trauma.
And then I remember, like, I'm not a stupid person, but I remember when I was going through a very abusive marriage, which, again, I began to see that if we don't work on these issues, we translate. I'd been out of the business, I'd been off drugs, and then, of course, I get in this abusive marriage, and I began to see how I was translating the same thing like an alcoholic is a dry drunk. I began to see that, and then I noticed that I was just, like, stupid. Like, my brain just kicked off. And, I mean, again, I was very lucky that I landed in the right people who explained to me that when the brain is so overstressed, the trauma, I found this guy who was an expert in neurology and trauma, and he said that what happens essentially is your brain cuts off. And he said it's not that you're stupid, it's that your brain is overwhelmed and it's shutting off. And because I couldn't even think my way through it, even though I was an extremely intelligent person. I mean, I got into college at 16. I wasn't stupid, but the brain, and that's another thing I hear with the hostility. People say, well, they're acting so stupid. Well, obviously they don't understand how trauma works. Your brain shuts off,
Yeah.
But again, if you're there, I mean, again, my early sponsor, I wouldn't even be able to get dressed. I wouldn't be able to leave the house. My first sponsor would do that. He would literally show up, force me to get dressed, drag me out to the car, and then once I got over that hump, I was all right. But it was, again, just like my brain would just kick off, and I needed that help,
Yeah, and it's nothing like that now because the Dignity program has dismantled for whatever reason. I guess funding, I don't know. All the funding's going to sex trafficking and
well, let's talk about that, because what happened, and I didn't even know myself what hit. It took me a while to figure out. I know that, okay, like you're describing, let me give you the overall picture. You're describing a very thriving program, where a sisterhood, a community. It's working. People are getting well. It's functioning. You've got outreach. You've got this is what I'm seeing, right? And then in 2003, it was 2003, all of a sudden, everything. Now, Dignity was one of the exceptions, and I didn't understand why at the time, but we had chapters of PA all over. We had them in L.A., we had them in New York, Seattle, Portland, Houston, Dallas. I mean, we were everywhere. And 2003, 2004, right about in there, I get this, it was 2004, I get this phone call from everybody. I mean, all of a sudden my phone just takes off, and I've got people calling me. And Kathleen was one of them, and she's saying, we've been told that we can't have our meetings, anymore in these certain locations, and we're being banned from the property. Now, she still had Dignity, but, I remember Kathleen was trying to get a hold of me, but the other ones were telling me that they were being banned from the property, from the Salvation Armies and the Catholic Charities. Now, if it was one person or one meeting, I'd understand, but it was like everybody. And so I'm trying to find out what happened, what's wrong, because, again, you see, we were working, we were effective, so I'm really not understanding what happened, all across the nation. It was just like this pink slip effect. It just, all of a sudden we're being kicked out of these, because, again, keep in mind, other churches would not let us meet there. They didn't want a bunch of hookers on their property, that kind of thing. So, I mean, we did meet at the Salvation Army and the Catholic Charities because they were free. And so all these people are calling me going, our meeting's been shut down, and we've been kicked out of the property. We don't know what's going on. And nobody would answer me. I did find out later what happened. It was this TVRA, this Revictimization Act, was rewritten. And essentially it said that no federal money would be going out unless the group was anti-prostitution. It was a strange explanation. It said that money would go out for victims, but that no money would go out and no support whatsoever with any group that called sex work work. that you had to be a trafficking victim or you got nothing. And so essentially that's what they did is we aren't about that. You know, we don't have that view, and we don't, you know what I mean? So, and they basically just, they wiped it out, and then they started over trying to only focus on victims, you know, people that, you know, were only sold. And so it caused this. Now, granted, there was the lawsuit later that overturned all of it. But, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to hear from you is you were seeing, you didn't know any of this was going on. You just saw the change of how the new guard, you know, and that's kind of what I'd like you to talk about is what did you see happen?
Well, I remember trying to go into the programs like the Dignity and Speak and get, because I took a time out to go to school. I had a baby and I was in school. So I basically was not active for a while because I was, you know, I had a very challenging pregnancy and then I was going to school. And so I took a break from going for a while, from going actually taking the meetings into the jails. I wasn't doing that when I was pregnant. And and I was in school, so I was still involved, but not like as much as I used to be. And then when I was
you did what you were supposed to do. You started getting on with your life and having a baby and going to school, and you did what you were supposed to do, you know?
Yeah, and when I was like trying to go back to get involved again once my life kind of calmed down after the baby and everything, and to return to the meetings, they were no longer allowing me to go into the meetings anymore. And they were like closing them off. They had one Dignity House where it was like, no, I mean, I couldn't even find the meetings anymore. And so we would just do our own informal meetings on our own because I was in, you know, in the other 12-step program, the Alcoholics Anonymous. So I just looked for women in there that I could, and it's quite the same. I mean, a lot of people don't understand it. They're like, what do you mean you can't just quit? You know, you can't just quit behaving that way. You know? They just don't get it.
Well, the same, again, like the alcoholic used to say. People didn't understand why they couldn't just stop drinking. That's why they had to band together. You know, we need to band together because we understand why, you know.
Yeah, and I was just at a training the other day, like, I don't know, like a couple months ago, where they were talking about what we're supposed to be doing if we get involved, if we get any clients that are with the work that I was doing. I was doing some work with Child Protective Services, and they came in and did a training for sex trafficking victims, and it was just all about like arrest, like very punitive. It was just like, okay, sometimes you just need to go to jail, and that's going to be what's going to make you change. And I was like, no, that's not what they used to do. They used to divert you into the program, into the Prostitutes Anonymous program, not put you in, you know, it's just like the old days when they used to like put Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, put alcoholics in jail.
Yeah, it is. Well, again, see, you hit on the difference because a perfect example, I get arrested. I get stuck on probation. Well, I don't want to go to jail. So guess what? I'm going to lie. You know, I'm going to tell that PO anything he wants to frickin' hear. Oh, I got a job? Sure. I did that. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm going to say anything I can to not get out of jail. Now what they're doing, and this is very disturbing to me because they're recreating what I saw. So I saw this.
Yeah.
I saw all these programs that were saying, oh, we're successful. No, you're not. You've got a bunch of women lying their ass off so that they don't go to jail. You know, and in the meantime, they were calling me up, you know, telling me the truth, that they're, like, leaving these homes, et cetera, that they were in and turning tricks down the street, or they're turning them in the back room of the donut shop, or, you know, like, I'll give an exact argument with a guy in Arizona. There was a woman he insisted that was the success story of Project Rose. He said, we've got her into subsidized housing, we've got her a job at the donut shop at the airport, and you know, she's out of the business now, and we are very successful. We do not need your advice. Thank you. I says, really? Okay, this woman's working at the donut shop at the airport. Okay. I sent a member of PA down to find this woman, and it turned out she was turning tricks out of the back room of the donut shop.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he may think it was successful because that's what he wants to hear. You force these women into lying, yeah, they're going to tell you anything. I've seen that with the WIN program in Vegas. All of those women, oh, yeah, I'm out of the business. Oh, yeah. And then they're graduating them, but they're still turning tricks. But they're, you know, I'm hearing about it because I'm not putting them in jail, you know.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, I mean, and I'm seeing this now with trafficking that's very disturbing. They're putting them in the subsidized housing. They're getting them in minimum wage jobs. They're keeping them stressed out financially. And it's all about compliance or go to jail. Compliance or we're going to take your kids. Compliance or we're going to take away your apartment. Well, again, all they're going to get is fear and lip service.
Yeah, and it's all just about, like, at this point, it's all just about, like, the money, the funding, like an ASU professor that was doing the training for this sex trafficking. She actually got, like, $1 million for this sex trafficking project, and it's, like, not helping at all. I don't think it's helping the victim. You know, I don't think it's helping the prostitutes at all, or anybody, or even the victims, because I mean, I worked at a shelter last year over at the border, and there was no program in the whole Pinal County. I mean, we're talking like within 150 miles from the border where the women are sex trafficked. There's nowhere to take them. There's no program. There's nothing.
Well, see, now you're hitting on the ironic part that I'm also running into, is I'm railing at these people with real, actual trafficking victims. I'm getting the call on the hotline with real, actual trafficking victims. And I'm going to the task forces, and I'm getting nothing. I'm getting they won't call me back. They won't answer me. I'm trying to get help for these people that are telling me they're being trafficked. And I'm getting nowhere. I'm getting absolutely nowhere. And see, then that clicked into, I remember what you told me that I wanted you to hear about. So this isn't just me. You're seeing actual trafficking victims in Arizona that are not getting any help.
No, because all the money is going to, you know, like the federal government, I don't know, they had that bill or law that was going to be looked at during, I think it was like late last year, something earlier in the year, where it was going to fund, you know, send money to sex trafficking programs. But the people who were writing those bills, the senators, one of them, he was actually going to the third world country, some Latin American third world country, and he was having young prostitute girls, underage girls, come and visit him at his hotel, and he was getting money, like funneling money from this country for his campaigns or whatever.
Yeah, you hit on two crucial points. Is when I call the movement got hijacked. Again, 2003 was when it started, and then 2004 is when it hit. But we got hijacked, and what happened was, and this is why I do believe Jeannie Palfrey was murdered, is because when she revealed the name Randall Tobias, it was not that he was a John. Randall Tobias came in 2003, and he wrote that Re-Victimization Act of 2003. And what that did is essentially it hijacked the movement out from under us. Because, again, Prostitutes Anonymous, we were looking at it like it is an industry. And out of that industry, there are people who are trafficked. But that out of all of us, we still need help to leave, whatever the situation is. Now, when that happened, and then also the money would only go to faith-based groups. You had to be a faith-based group, which we're not. And you had to, essentially say that all were trafficking victims, which they aren't. So essentially what he did with that act was he took, let's say, drug court. If you were to take Narcotics Anonymous out of drug court, that's what he did. Because by saying that we had to be all these things we're not, he got us out. It was a very clever wordplay. So, again, how do we prove this man was linked to prostitution and trafficking? How do we prove it? So, Jeannie came forward with the Black Book and proved it. Now, then, of course, she's magically found dead after that in 2009. Okay, then Menendez steps up. And it's interesting because I see they change names. Randall Tobias backs down. Then Menendez steps forward.
He's the one that was over there in some third world, Latin American third world country, basically having young prostitute underage girls visiting him at his exclusive hotel, and at the same time that he's writing this sex trafficking bill. So it's really not even about the girls; it's about who's going to be the pimp, the United States or the country. And who's
right, because what I see, what happened when they did that is by excluding us out of the system, we're now being excluded out of knowing whatever's going on and being able to access help for actual real victims. And the effect of that is, like you're saying, like describe what you're seeing down at the border with actual real trafficking victims. I mean, what's going on? What happens?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a paper with my professor. I just finished my master's a couple of years ago, and awesome. One of the last papers I was thank you. One of the last papers that I was helping her with journaling for a journal article is that there's like women that are young girls that they know they're going to be raped and trafficked. So before they even cross the border, they're already taking birth control pills and trying to protect themselves because they just know it's like automatic. It's part of it's now an automatic part of the culture of trying to get over here just to work, just to survive, just to eat. And, or even like to reunite with loved ones that are here in the United States.
And they want to make sure that we don't know about it because we're going to come in and do something about it. So they're shutting us out. I mean, you'll see. Are we as part of this 12-step group are we allowed anywhere near this? Are we allowed to be a part of what's going on to help these women?
We're not, because even the people who try to go in to just help the human trafficking, not even the sex trafficking, they are also running across a lot of struggles. Just go in there and take human rights violations, like to go in and document the human rights violations that are going on at the border and the injustice that's going on with just basic human rights of allowing them to be able to, have water, have food, not victimize them when they're coming over or getting caught coming over here. But they take the girls, like these coyotes are taking the girls and putting them in these houses out here, these like drug houses or, sex houses, whatever they are. I mean, I haven't been in the business a long time, so I know there's a whole language around it. But they're putting them in these houses, like tons of girls, and keeping them like hostage in these homes and threatening them, saying, if you leave, we'll murder your family. And people think this just happens in third world countries. No, this is happening right here at the border.
Yeah. And again, I know that when part of our process, as you know, part of our process is outreach. So what we used to do is we would go out there and our members would be going out doing outreach, but we're being shut out. We're being totally shut out of this because, again, everybody's covering their ass. They don't want us to see that they are. You're right. I'm hearing the same thing, that they're being denied even basic shelter, food, water. They're having their lives threatened, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, of course, they don't want us to find out what's going on, and be a part of that. But then you're telling me the ironic thing is that the shelters are letting the women go to work in strip clubs.
The shelters. Oh, yeah. When I was working at the domestic violence shelter over in Tucson, which is right an hour from the border. It's like within an hour from the border. They were saying, we don't tell them what to do. We don't control their life. They can go work at strip clubs if that's what they need to do. And I was like, no, that's not acceptable. But also I wanted to add just a point for the last thing we were talking about is that the professor that I was writing that article with for sex trafficking, she was denied tenure from Arizona State University after being there for over 10 years and having immaculate records with her students. Loved her. Her students wrote letters of recommendation for her for her tenure. I mean, she was just like dynamic, just an amazing professor. But because of the issues that she was addressing with women being exploited, especially border issues, she was denied tenure. Mm-hmm. And she basically had to leave the university. So that's the level that's gone to where we're being shut down at every level, even with a PhD.
Yeah, because again, when it first started happening to me, I had a sponsor that told me, nobody just does something to you, Jody. You know, if they're doing it to you, they're doing it to everybody, and you need to go out there and look. And sure enough, I found that all of us, you know, all the actual people that were really involved, real survivors, really doing the work, all of us, they're getting fired, they're getting canned, they're getting denied tenure, they're being smeared, they're being, you know, put on hold. I mean, you know, it was a universal thing, and I'm going, whoa, look at this. But then I started seeing who is being put in power, and what I'm seeing is a system where the only people they're letting near these or be involved are people whose jobs they can control. Because these are the calls that I'm getting is, I can't do that because they're threatening my job. I can't do that because they're threatening my job. And I'm seeing that they're only putting in people that they can threaten with their job, you know, to basically get compliant. And, of course, they're going to be quiet. Because I'm like, you know, I get these calls at 2 a.m. from somebody telling me some terrible things that are going on in these trafficking programs or to the women in the trafficking programs. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do something about it. And no, I'll lose my job. But they want me to know about it. Okay, but, you know, so I'm at this weird standstill where I don't know what to do about it other than document that it's happening, which is why I wanted you to come and talk about what you see, what's going on out there.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And also, like, when I was writing that paper with her, which was maybe about a year and a half ago, and then after that, I was doing the research for you on the sex trafficking bill with Senator Menendez and looking up, you know, like the senators and doing, you know, like some policy kind of research for you and sending you information. When I was doing all that, there were some weird things happening in my own neighborhood, like somebody put a gas can right outside on my porch. And, you know, my dog, who never barks, I mean, I could be gone a week and leave him a bunch of food, and I'm going to have my son come over and check on him or whatever. All of a sudden, my dog's, like, barking like crazy and just harassing the neighbors, like there's something going on. The dog is basically spooked.
Yeah, because that really concerned me is, you know, you're telling me you're fine when we first started talking. Then you start organizing a new meeting like it used to be. You start getting the word out that we're going to be putting a meeting together. You start to ask questions about what's going on so that, you know, who needs help so we can identify. And then you come back telling me, I found a gas can on my porch. And other things. You had other things going on to the point where I understand you had to back off. I mean, they were breaking in your house and stuff, weren't they?
Yeah. I called the police because somebody had poured oil on one of, like, actual oil. So on one side of the house, there was this gas can pointed at my porch, like it had a little, you know, the funnel was pointed straight at my porch. And then on the other side of the house, there was, somebody had poured actual car oil on one of the palm trees. So here's the gas can, here's the oil, right? And I'm like, they're like, this is insane. And I called the police, and they did not want to take a report. I said,
when they kicked in my front door, the police wouldn't take a report. They said I could have done it. And I take a look at me. You think I can kick in my front door?
And they refused. They refused to take the report. They did not take the report.
Well, what's going on with the sheriff down there? Because we had started to circulate, you know, that I was going to come down there. We were going to do a workshop. And next thing I know, I'm getting threatening calls from the Phoenix police. I mean, what's going on down there? They wouldn't take the report when your house was messed with?
No, they wouldn't take the report. I said, someone came and poured oil on my palm tree. I know that I can get a police report on that, and they would not write the report. They just came out and looked at it and talked to one of the neighbors and said, hey, you know, like, did you pour oil over there? And They're like, no, we didn't do it. And that was it. Then they left. Well,
Right.
they, oh, your neighbor said your dog, they came over and said, oh, your neighbor said your dog's barking a lot, so if you can, just bring your dog in. I was like, this has nothing to do with my dog. I called you because this is happening here.
Right. And I mean, I think they broke
into
your car. They broke into your car too, didn't they?
No.
I thought they. Okay, I'm thinking of somebody else. And God, so many people are telling me they're threatened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was just kind of like, okay, I gotta, kind of go underground here for a while, which is, that's what we have to do here sometimes at the border. We have to work on, just like the Underground Railroad.
Right.
And so we still do the work, but we have to do it very covertly and more cautiously. And it's not going to be like it was before, but we could still make strides. Like I, still work with women who are coming in to the dignity program and take them aside and say, this is what was taught to me. When I came in, this is what I did. And work the steps and in fact, when I was on the trip this weekend to Los Angeles, I ran into another girl who had gone, one of the graduates of the Dignity Program, and she used to go to some of the original Prostitutes Anonymous meetings there at the Women's Street Support Center. And we just kind of ran into each other by fluke. She goes to Narcotics Anonymous, and I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And we just happened to be on this trip together for the weekend. She's celebrating 23 years sober, and I was celebrating 24 years. And we took our message down to Skid Row, the Nickel, on East Los Angeles. We were on a panel down there for the weekend.
Wow.
On Saturday night on Skid Row down there in the Skid Row Drifters, we spoke there and ended the weekend on Venice Beach at a meeting there. And it was just so powerful. And by the end of the weekend, she knew my story and I knew hers. And I actually gave her your phone number, by the way, because I told her,
thank you.
You're working on some. I said, hey, she's working on some. I read the literature on sex trafficking that you did write, and it's just amazing. It was just amazing, and I wanted her to read it, so I gave her your phone number. I said, you got to read this literature that Prostitutes Anonymous is writing and working on now. It's just, it's just the new revolution that we need right now.
Right, because, this is where I'm at, Jewel, and I mean, I'm trying to also, with us, because I can't do it alone. That's one thing I've learned. I cannot do it alone. I've got to reach out to the ones that it worked. I mean, it worked for you. It worked for her. It was working until these outside influences came in and started creating these problems. Because, again, you being threatened the way that you were when you started a meeting up there, because we said, okay, we'll start a meeting again, then you start getting threatened, and you had to back off. You just had to. Because I'm also getting calls from other cities. I was getting calls from Texas and Florida and Portland and, Idaho, and, I mean, I'm literally getting them all over, and the women are telling me the same thing. I'm being stalked. I'm being threatened. Something is wrong, And so, what am I supposed to do? If we literally cannot open a meeting without someone stalking and threatening us, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? Because the imperative is like, would you be alive? Would she be alive if there was not a Prostitutes Anonymous? I doubt it. I really, from what you guys have told me, I doubt it. And I mean, I see what's happening out there. So, but you hit it on the head, is that we're going to have to literally reinvent ourselves and find another, because you know what? I remember it, and I didn't click with it at the time, but the mentors that I got used to tell me that Narcotics Anonymous, when you would go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, you would be arrested. The police would come in and raid the meetings, and they used to have underground meetings. And it clicked with me. I'm like, oh my God, we're at that point. We're at that point where, and the reason why they would do that, the reason why the police would shut down their Narcotics Anonymous meetings is because they wanted everybody to go into the AA program. That's what they were trying to do, is if you didn't go to AA and you didn't go to the AA programs, they were trying to shut you down, which essentially is what's happening to us. We're being told that we have to conform to this trafficking thing or else, essentially, you know?
And a lot of women are. They're, the ones that are out there doing some of the work with sex trafficking victims because they have federal monies, they are saying, oh, I was sex trafficked. And I was like, no, you weren't. I've heard your story. You've shared it with me. That is not sex trafficking.
Well, that's the other thing. I did step back for a while. Again, my grand sponsor, he always used to tell me, well, step back for a little bit and see if it works. So I see this. I see these women that are saying, oh, yeah, I was a sex trafficking victim, and, they're up there doing their little two-step, right? And then I've gotten to know them. I've gotten to see the quality of their recovery. They're not clean, and they're not in recovery, and they are not happy. So, this is a real imperative. It's not working. We have to do something.
And she told me when I asked her about it, when I said, why are you, because she's pretty prominent here and doing work. I forgot. She just finished her bachelor's. She was recognized by the governor here, and you had referred me to her. I can't remember her name now. But so when I asked her, I said, why are you saying you're a sex trafficking victim? And she goes, that's what we have to do to protect ourselves so that we don't get in trouble for talking about it. So basically it's like, this is the only way I can, I'm being silenced.
Yeah, and you know what? They're rewarding them. They're giving them grants. They're giving them jobs, etc. So, yeah, I see this. I'm going, okay, they're getting good jobs. They're getting a lot of praise. They're getting to travel and speak. What's wrong? I've gotten to know them on a personal level, and it's an act. And what happens when we act, Joel? What happens when we act, when we're not honest? I mean, isn't that what we do? Think about it. As prostitutes, what do? We put on the smile. We put on the painted face. We smile like everything's pretty and rosy, right? And then it's an act. And then what happens? So essentially, what I'm seeing that these trafficking people have done, in a weird way, they've tapped into the fact that we know how to act and smile and be pretty for the camera. They've tapped into the perfect victim.
Yeah. And then the program wanted to put me on the panel with police and judges to kind of like look at me and say, oh, and I refused. I'm like, no, I'm the new dignity program now that doesn't have Prostitutes Anonymous. That is very punitive and believes in, let's just arrest the women.
Yeah, and I'm not going to name names, but as I've gotten to know these women to see, maybe it's a good thing. I told myself when I first started seeing it, I'm thinking, okay, they got good jobs, they're getting praise, they're getting a lot of recognition, et cetera, a lot of pats. So maybe it's not a bad thing. So I've gotten to know them very well, and I'm coming to find out that they're acting out in other ways. Let's put it that way. They're not clean. They're not clean, they're drinking, or they're depressed, or whatever. I mean, I'm finding it's not. It's a dry drunk, essentially, is what they're doing. So I think it's really ironic that we do have women running around going, oh, I was a trafficking survivor, and they're getting money, and they're getting praise, and whatever, but they're essentially acting out in a dry drunk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's not really helping the women to lie, because it's like, we can't give something away that we don't have.
Well, then you hit it on the head, too, and that's the inventory. Because then other people will say to me, this seems to be working is what they'll say to me. They're getting money. They've got a house. They've got a program. I go, really? It seems to be working. Well, you know what? How many people are getting it? How many people are actually getting it under them? And the answer is coming back universally, no. Now, there was a research report that came out. It's called Leaving Prostitution, actually. Yeah, Leaving Prostitution by Sharon Oslin. It just came out last year. And she actually proved that fact. She went into these programs. She went into 3 programs, actually, in there, and she spent 10 years studying them. And the 10-year study is she studied the ones that had Prostitutes Anonymous, old school, the way you saw originally, versus the ones that didn't. And guess what? The ones that didn't, they folded, and nobody got better. They folded. Yeah. So, because I've had to go to my grand sponsor and say, what am I going to do about this? Because NA had the same problem. NA had the same exact problem. He says, all you can do is stand back until people catch on it's not working. Yeah. Too bad people have to die over it. That's the bad part. That's what's killing me. Yeah, that's the hardest part to watch that. It's just really, and I was like in there, like
I mean, I was willing to go to any length, and then somebody told me, you know what? If you end up getting murdered or hurt or something happens to you over this, then who's going to carry them? Who's going to be there to carry the message to the next person that needs it? Who's going to be there to pass it on? So you cannot sacrifice yourself. Like, you have to wait. You have to step back and trust that God is bigger than this, capital.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is the situation that even I have to deal with, is the fine line between that very, very fine line of, okay, there comes a certain point where if we don't do what God's will is in the program, okay, then we're not going to have the recovery to make it through either. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can kill yourself. You can go out there and get yourself whacked by one of these people by acting stupid, or you can also not do anything and wind up killing yourself through the disease. And that is a struggle that even I go through. I have to go through that fine line to know that, you know what, as long as I'm walking in God's will, then what? I'll have the power to carry it out. I'm still here. Nothing's happening to me. But I also know when God tells me to move forward and when God tells me to move back. I mean, absolutely. There's times that you're not stupid. Like there's that story, I know there's that analogy where Jesus the devil told him to throw himself off the cliff. No, you don't throw yourself off the cliff. You're not stupid, But on the other hand, you can also walk through the furnace and not be singed. I mean, so that is, for us, that is that constant balance of when do we move forward, knowing that God will take care of us and do what we need to do so that we also stay in recovery and don't lose our recovery.
Yeah, and I think having my children have really helped me with that, with finding that balance, because when all this was happening during the summer, my son was moving from a house to a condo, and he needed a place to stay for the summer, so him and his family moved in with me, and I felt really safe when they were there. I felt like, okay, I'm going to be okay, like I'm not scared. I wasn't that scared even from the beginning, because, I kind of grew up in crazy, so it's like I'm used to crazy, but you told me, be cautious. So I kind of have had to train myself to be scared. So you kept telling me, be careful, and I was like, okay, I'll be careful. And then my son moved in, and then he moved out, and when he moved out, I was like, okay, that's when I have to step back. Because he's like, okay, well, we're moving out now. We found our place, and we're going to, go move on with our lives. And I was like, okay, well, I'll miss you. That kid hasn't been home since he was 15. So it was nice to have my grandkids there and everything. So then they moved out, and I was by myself again, and I was like, okay, so I have to go back to being careful. And I had a hard time finding work even, too. And I went to, I live in a nice neighborhood now, so they have really nice places where you can go and get a food box, or even, they have people giving away designer clothes in this neighborhood, and I would go to the local Goodwill and get free clothes and a box of food because I couldn't find a job sometimes, and and I didn't mind so much because I knew that I was willing to go to any length, to stay in my recovery and stuff, and to pass on the message, and I shared that in a meeting at the Dignity House, during the summertime. I said, yeah, I have to, sometimes I still don't have money sometimes, and I have health issues, so sometimes I don't work, and I struggle financially sometimes, and I don't mind if I have to go get a food box or go ask for help, because I'd rather ask for help than to live the way I was living before I got into recovery.
Right.
It's okay to need help. Because today I can look at people in the eyes. Like when I go and get the food box, I can look at them in the eyes and say thank you. And I can look at people in the eyes and say thank you for helping me. Or, and then other years I've been the one giving the food boxes out.
Yeah. I mean, whatever it is, you do know if you stay in God's will, you'll be fine. You'll always be taken care of. And that we know, if we cross that other line, though, into the disease, we're not going to be okay,
Yeah.
But that is also, And see, this is why you are being a part of change, is because I've had to sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do about the fact that we've been essentially hijacked? A program that worked has been hijacked, and it's being destroyed, and people are dying. Okay, now, what are we going to do about it? Because that's our serenity prayer, isn't it? Is the courage to change the things we can and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, so I go back to NA's history. And NA had the same problem. In fact, people would even be arrested for going to NA meetings at one point. This was before drug court. And this was before NA was what it is. Now, you know, I do know that when I had the mentors who explained this to me, they warned me. They said, you will go through a point in time when you will have this happen, like we did. And I said, you know, so of course, what did you do about it? And they said, well, we changed the laws. Now, this is where it's getting to be an interesting quandary, is we have changed the laws. There has been the lawsuit of the ACLU versus Catholic bishops. I spent 2 years trying to find a lawyer that would take on the case, and they were all afraid of the church. Nobody wants to sue the Catholic Church. And then I found the ACLU.
Oh, yeah.
And they weren't afraid. So we got the ACLU to sue and win. Okay, they've won. And then further, there was still that thing about the wording, about that you had to say that sex work was not a job, that you had to say it was all rape. Well, we can't say it's all rape because some of the jobs don't even entail sex, you know? And if I start talking like Rachel Moran, I'm going to lose our membership. I'm going to lose our, because the thing that you trust in us is okay, you hit it on the head. You trust us because we understand. We're real. You know what I mean? That's why you trust us. So if I lose that, we lose everything. So I then, you know, we get things going where there was a Supreme Court decision in 2012. This was only a couple of years ago. 2012, the Supreme Court came down and said all of this, everything that you've seen that happened, all of it's unconstitutional. So we now have a lawsuit from the ACLU. We now have a Supreme Court decision. Okay, now, when NA won those lawsuits, for them to be treated with respect, right, and to be who they are, okay, the press was different. They were able to go to the press, and there was news articles that came out about it, and then people were alerted. People were alerted. You can't go in and arrest addicts at a meeting anymore, okay? Now, in our situation, there is a whole regime of people in power that have been told, you're going to lose your job unless you do such and such. You're going to lose your job if you talk to these people in the old school PA, right? You're going to lose your job if you talk to Jody. I mean, there's all these people have been trained this, okay? They don't realize that the law has changed. I've gone back to the media, and the media now, as you know, is like corporately owned. I can't get public service announcements out. I can't get, you know, so I've banged my head against the wall going, how am I going to get the word out to these people that the law has changed, and it is in our favor now. You know, now I do have a couple of things in mind, and I do think that they'll work, you know, and you're part of that. This interview that you're doing with me right now is part of it, because I'm going to go back to, we used to have weekly access. We used to have a weekly public access television show. And on that television show, I would bring on women like you that would talk about their experience. And that's how we got where we were. We got the ground that we did by bringing on women talking about their experience. So they couldn't act like we didn't exist. If we're on TV, they can't act like we don't exist. So I did find, that's why I'm in LA. LA does have public access television stations now. Vegas doesn't. So here I am in LA, and I found the TV stations, and I'm getting that all together, and hopefully I'll have that together by next month. You know, and then once we start, and I've got also an article coming out in a recovery magazine in December, yada, yada. So I do think that that's going to turn things around, and we're going to see the change.
That's great,
But
that's
you're part
amazing.
of that. As always, we're all part of that, you know. You talking about your experience so that others can hear what you're seeing and you know, and hear you.
Yeah, and I think that's important, you know, that new literature and everything, that to keep that, because those are our stories. We were here, and we need to be, you know, known that we were here, we are here, we're going to be here, no matter what. Like, they cannot shut us down. There's nothing they can do to shut us down, because we're like, This is like spirit.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Just because we've, I've had to tell members, don't say our name online, don't talk about us online. I mean, I've had to, what you're doing, I've had to tell our members to go underground, but it doesn't mean we're not here.
Yeah. Yeah. And God puts exactly the people I need right at the right time, because over the weekend when I ran into that woman, and I said, we were driving home, and I said, remember Women's Street Support Center? And she goes, oh my God. I go, do you remember Nora? Do you remember the PA meetings there? And it was just like, oh my God. You couldn't believe it like that. It was just like, a family reunion, like somebody you haven't seen for a super long time, and then God puts them right into your life right when you need them.
Yeah. And see, that's why I want to see the new generation. I want to see the new generation come through, because right now they have put a stranglehold on our new generation. You know? I mean, the newcomers are being threatened, and they're not able to deal with it the way you are. But you know what? I guess you connected with her. You gave her my number. It's all coming together. We're going to take this back. We are. We're going to take this back, and we're going to take it back like we did in the first place. Because that's how we did it in the first place, Jewel, is we got up and we told our story.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to keep telling our story and writing our literature and getting it out there underground and passing it on, just like they did with the Underground Railroads and everything. Like right now, part of my thesis when I was working on my master's was writing about the ethnic studies program that was banned in a school district at the border. And it was so efficient that students were no longer dropping out of school. They were actually going on to college because of this program. And the department, the state of Arizona wrote a bill and closed down the program. And now it's at the federal government level where they're fighting it at the federal courts. It's in the federal courts right now, and they're fighting the decision to close it down at the state level.
Because you're right. What they've done to us is not unique. I'm seeing a lot of effective programs that are being shut down. And, again, I used to scratch my head going, I don't understand. But then when I've come to get to know the other people, it's about money. There's more money in making us sick. I don't know where this came from, this thinking of keep people sick, make them sick through the food, make them sick through the water, make them sick through the programs, make them sick, get them in jail, and a certain segment of people are cleaning up off making us sick,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like that sex trafficking bill. It's kind of like, okay, we'll give a certain amount of money to the third world countries that are going to be helping us with this bill, but it's not. It's like, who's going to be in charge? Who's going to be the top pimp of the girls now being sex trafficked?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because I've seen who they're getting. They're shutting all of us out, like you're talking about the professor and these other women. I mean, that's it. They're shutting the real ones out, and they're getting people in, like that woman. I won't say her name, but the woman I know in Phoenix who's lying. They'll put her up because she'll lie for money.
I think it was she described when she got that $1 million grant. I think her name's Dominic or something. I can't even remember. But she's a professor, and the way she talked about it when I was listening to her, and I just happened to be in this training, they sent me, I was doing some temp work for Child Protective Services in the summer, and I went in for this. They said, go to this sex trafficking training, and I go, oh, that'll be interesting. Okay. So I went in, and there she is, and she's talking about her study, and I was like, who do you think you are talking like that about prostitutes when you've never had that experience? You have no strength, you have no hope. You cannot use our language like that. It would be like a black person, like a white person saying to a black person, hey, you nigger.
Yeah, it is. Oh, this campaign that came out the 22nd of what to call us. I am so offended. How dare a non-person tell society what to call me? I am so offended. And I said exactly that. I said, would you go to an African American and tell them what to call themselves? I mean, how offensive.
Oh, I was so angry. I was just like, I cannot believe this. And then the new person that's doing the whole program with Catholic Charities now, because now Catholic Charities has totally changed their direction, and they're saying, so then that program was saying something like, well, we go to jail, and that's, we put them in jail if they don't want to do what they're supposed to be doing, what we tell them what they should be doing. And I was like, that's very punitive. That's not the way it used to be. It used to be that we would go and pick them up at their apartment, wherever they were at, all bloody and beaten up and beaten down and hopeless. We would pick them up literally with their clothes, with their dog even. At one point, somebody took their dog with them when they were being picked up in the van from the Prostitutes Anonymous back then. And we would bring them in, and we would allow them to sleep and eat, and then we would give them a room, and they would go to meetings and work the 12 steps of Prostitutes Anonymous. And
yeah, but you know what I found out is the difference? I'll tell you what I found out is the difference. When we started in the 80s, as you know, AIDS was raging. And let me tell you, because I've had to ask myself, I've had to step back and say, what happened, right? I mean, it used to be they gave us whatever we needed. You saw they gave us whatever we needed. We had a red carpet. And now all of a sudden we're being shut down and people ordering us around and telling us what to call ourselves. So I've had to pull back and do my own praying and meditating of what happened. Look, in the 80s, AIDS was raging, and nobody wanted to deal with us. The jails wanted us out. The treatment centers wanted us out. Everybody wanted rid of us in the 80s. So guess what they did? They handed them to us. They go, here, you deal with them. No, we had the red carpet then, right? Now all of a sudden they think AIDS is under control. They think AIDS is under control. So now what happens? They get money for everybody that they lock up. For everybody that they put in a safe house, for everybody that they lock up in jail, they get money. So guess what? They want them to fuck up. They want them not to do it. They want them to go to jail because that's how they make their money. Now, where we're going to get the last laugh is they're not listening. They are not listening. I am. Yeah. I get the calls every day from our members all over the USA, and we are dealing with another HIV epidemic. And it's not being reported because the women are not being tested. They're not doing, you know how we used to do the outreach and the testing, et cetera? That's how we knew. I'm hearing it. I'm hearing that they're getting the tests off the books, and we are dealing with another HIV epidemic. It is huge. If you go into a strip club now or a massage parlor now, these women are not carrying condoms. They are not practicing safe sex. We have another HIV epidemic raging, and by the time these people figure it out, it's going to be, like, out of control. And I've been knocking on the doors of some of these HIV/AIDS people saying, hello, we've got another epidemic brewing, and they're not listening to me because they're all, like, in this trafficking mindset, right? Yeah. So, I mean, but again, I think that once we get, like, your interview out there, and once I get, the TV interviews, things going, et cetera, once I start getting more media out there of us telling our story, I do think we're going to turn things around. So, I mean,
and it's typical of the United States to look at, you look at Mexico, especially here on the border, typical of the border states to look at Mexico and say, look, they're the problem. If we enforce if we, like, put up bigger walls and, shut them out and arrest them or, put out Minutemen out there and monitor the border or build bigger fences and walls and have more security, that's going to fix the problem. Like, it's so easy for the United States to scapegoat the border problems so that they don't have to look at what's really the real problem.
Yeah. Well, again, there's more money in building bigger fences, so. But eventually, it's going to come crashing down on them. And that's when I think we're going to get their attention, is when it does. I hate to say it, but I think when it does, that'll get their attention. So is there anything else that you want to say, that you want people to hear that, for any reason, anything you want to get out there to the newcomers or to the people out there in the system? Anything you want to let them know about?
Yeah. After graduate school, I got into some social justice art and activism along the lines of art and protest. And I created, after the summer when I was working on that bill with you, just doing the research for you for that, I created like a whole collection of just addressing, sexual abuse and domestic violence and how it's all tied in with prostitution. I created like a whole collection, and it just like took off. Like right now I have the collection in 3 different art shows in downtown Phoenix at 3 different galleries. One is at ASU Gallery, one's at Firehouse Gallery on Roosevelt Road, which is prime art district here in Phoenix, Arizona. And then another one, I built an altar for women that have been involved in prostitution and maybe didn't survive. I built an altar for Day of the Dead, and it got accepted by the Central Gallery at the Phoenix Library. And in there, I put outreach numbers, and they're very hidden. You know, like you have to really look at all the intricate details. But if a woman walks in there and sees, you know, hey, this is speaking to me. This is speaking to, you know, women who have been prostitutes or who need help. And it's right there in downtown Phoenix at the Central Gallery, and they love it. It's like they're saying it's one of their best exhibits. And then I got into this play, so I'm in like 2 different theater plays to bring awareness to the issues. And it's all like I'm doing it very underground through the arts. And it's just amazing to me that I'm at this point in my life now. Now I'm still a starving artist, technically. But I'm absolutely just so grateful that, you know, I get to carry the message that way and just be there. You know, like it's the highlight of my life to be able to carry the message in that way, which is through my art protest.
Yeah, you've transformed your voice through art. And see, you hit it on the head. I think our solution at this point is media, art, which, again, I'm tying into the radio show, I'm going to get us back on cable. The art thing, I mean, I'm working on some scripts right now of that. You hit it right on the head. I'm banging out some scripts right now for a play. I'm banging out a script for a detective series. Because, again, I've had to look at what worked for NA. And also AA, you know, AA had the Days of Wine and Roses, you know, that movie. They had, you know, all these, you know, they had movies coming out that raised awareness. They had, you know, plays. They had, you know, I mean, that's essentially, you're right, that's the only way I can think of is that we're going to get our voice heard. So, you know, I'd love you to send me some photographs if you can of that. I would absolutely love to, video, photos, anything of your art. I'd love to get that out there. And then also, if you know anybody else that knows anything about script writing, have them give me a call because I am banging out like 3 different scripts right now that I'm struggling with, you know.
Yeah, and it's powerful because, you know, it's so underground that a woman would have to look at the pictures and say, I know what that picture's saying because she knows she has had that experience. And anybody else would look at it and just blow it off. But if you've had that experience, you will know what that picture's saying. You know, so it's very, like, undercover. And that's what I love about art, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, we've also started, and that also ties into, if you know anybody that has a tattoo, because I've started another sort of, you know, social media about tattoos, and I want to feature survivors. And also women, I'm going to have women that are in the business as well as survivors, but I'm going to be peppering it. See, because here's what I'm thinking, is a way to convey, this is what I'm hearing, is that women in the sex industry right now are being so bombarded with this arrest mentality and this big boots mentality that they're defensive. They're very defensive. That, you know, they've got the church people coming at them. They've got the cops coming at them. So I've had to, you know, I then try to talk to them, and their defenses are up. Now, what I found, you know, and I usually spend about an hour explaining to them, I'm not like the cops, I'm not like the church ladies, and after like about an hour they calm down. But I've been asking myself, how can I bypass this quicker? And I found this great way. I sit down and I start talking about their tattoos. You know, tell me the story of your tattoo, and we start talking, and then there's this click. And then when I show them the survivors' tattoos, they're like, you mean survivors? And I mean, it's causing a whole sort of domino effect, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So if you've got any survivors that have tattoos, you know, I'd like to get a picture of it and their story, and I'll put it on this site that I'm going to be showing to women in the business, you know? And
that's
then, and then they'll see survivor's tattoos, and that will get their mind thinking, oh, wow, survivor, I might get out of this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great because it's like all about like passing on the message, but in a language that we speak. You know, it's our own language. And people will relate. People relate to tattoos that, you know, or any kind of like stories or message that's like, because when they first started the farm workers movement, like people didn't know how to read or write, and they were being brutalized and abused, and these farm workers during the civil rights movement. And so what happened is they went in and started writing these little cartoon characters to show them how their social justice and human rights were being violated. And they would write these little they passed out these little cartoon character, like a little cartoon, and people knew, because they didn't know how to read or write, but they knew from looking at the cartoon, hey, you know, like, my rights are being violated, and I'm not being treated like a human being, and there's somebody out there, there's an organization that's going to help us with this.
You just had a great idea, because you know what, Joel? My God, you've had a great idea, because I'm finding that more and more of these women are being turned out when they're like 12. They're not reading. And you've hit it right on the head. When I start talking to them about when these police pick you up and they start threatening you with arrest, they're violating your rights, yada, yada, and I start talking, you know, like legalese at them, I can see this blank look. They're not understanding me, you know, and I have been wondering, how do I communicate? My God, that is a great idea.
Yeah, and it's all the language of the heart, and we know the language. We're the only ones. The amazing thing is that you and I and others that have gone through this experience of prostitution, we're the only ones that know that language, and it's like kind of the code talkers. We're the code talkers, and we have the language, and those others that are making money off of us right now don't know that language. So that gives us an advantage because we know the language.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. And that's it. When I break through those defenses, that's it. That's when they hear me and they understand I'm not like them. But I mean, I have been trying to find another way to communicate things like the rights, and that's, oh my God, that is a great idea. We could, you know, because they do. That's something I've noticed with Instagram. So many of the women now are like on Instagram, and it's all visual, you know. And I've been trying to think of how do we do that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And somebody was like putting something on Facebook the other day. They're like, well, this isn't anything new. The Aztecs always wrote on walls and drew pictures on walls. And we go on people's walls and we see these pictures. Well, I put my art on there, and it's like, that's going to translate. Some woman's going to look at that and go, oh, I get what she's trying to say. You know, like, I know that code.
Well, you and I need to work on that, because I cannot draw worth beans. I cannot draw at all. But, I mean, I do want to convey certain things. Like, that's the biggest thing. When these police are coming up threatening these women, with arrest, yada, yada, they don't know their rights, and they're being taken advantage of. And I do want to raise their awareness. I think that is a great way that we can get to, like, some Instagram. Get it out there on the social media in a visual form. They get it, but again, I can't draw. So help me with this. Let's get this out there, you know?
Yeah. Well, not actually, my media is not drawing. It's building small theater miniature installations.
Well, whatever.
So
help me with that. Maybe you know somebody maybe you know an artist that can help me draw, you know?
Yeah, but I take pictures of them and put them on social media, and people do respond. People do see that, and I had somebody the other day at the meeting over in LA, like when I was sharing my story, came up to me and said, your story just, I mean, I was meant to be here. Your story just really spoke to me, and I thank you. You know, like they said, thank you so much for being here. And I don't know, like I'm just talking, it's God talking through me. You know, I'm just telling my experience, strength, and hope. It's nothing special. I'm not anybody special. It's just God's grace and the fact that I happen to be here at the right time, at the right moment, right when the Dignity Program and Prostitutes Anonymous was coming in here at 15 weeks. It was just like, just divine intervention.
Yeah, he obviously had a purpose for you. That's why I said, I'm going to make you head of our art service department is what I'm going to do.
Oh, I would be honored to do that.
No, serious, I'm going to make you head of our art service department, and we'll brainstorm and we'll get some projects going.
Yeah, because I think we would make some really incredible, documentaries.
Oh,
Of people's
absolutely.
lives and to make sure that our stories are not forgotten, that we are not forgotten. And there's been some of us that have been murdered and haven't survived, and those stories have to be told too.
Well, any interviews you get, give to me, and I'll put on, our channel. We've got a YouTube channel, and, I just need I'm not in Arizona. You are. I mean, anything you send to me, I'll get out there. And you don't have, if you're worried about backlash, I don't have to put your name on it, anything like that. Just get it to me, and I'll get it out on social media. And any film at all that you send me, any interviews, whatever, I'll get it out there so people can hear what's going on.
Okay, yeah, and I sent you that girl. She's going to call you, the one that I met this weekend that also went to the Women's Street Support Center. I went to the Prostitutes Anonymous meeting with her.
Awesome.
Back in '89. So I told her to call you as well because I told her about the new literature that maybe she can read it over.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds like a great note to end the interview on, and yeah, that's a great note to end the interview on how we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for calling. Thank you for the interview. Thank you for sharing. You're awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. All right.
Thanks. Bye.
Love you, baby. Bye bye.
Hey, I love you too.